I think it's not fair enough, and the reason for that is if you're in office already, you have a tremendous advantage in terms of you have the resources at the state level to use to campaign on your behalf. For instance, in my race, my opponent has been able to send out lots of literature during the campaign season, which amounts to using the public resources to launch one's campaign. There are other things that they can do with the public office or the public resources, which they use to their advantage in that sense. So it makes them unmovable. Now, in my district, there are 60,000 registered Democrats, but less than 10% come out to vote in any state election. And when you speak to them, they would say, well, it makes no difference because I can't really influence the outcome. And that's because once you're in office, because we don't have rules that limits the use of the office to maintain yourself in office, voters in the district feel powerless. And it's not a question of early voting. It's not a question of voter registration. It really is a question of making elected officials accountable to the voters. And we have 60,000 registered Democrats in our district, and less than 6,000 come out and vote on average. And the reason for that is because they feel disenchanted and they don't feel they can make the elected officials accountable. So we need to somehow correct that to make them less able to use the public resources to maintain themselves in office forever, in some cases. I'm an old high school mathematics teacher. I've been teaching at public schools for some portion of my career. And I find that when I meet people on the streets, they're not sure exactly what an assembly person does. They're not sure exactly what a state senator does. And they're not clear about the difference between the federal level, the state level, and the city level. They're not sure about the requirements to be involved in the political process. I think as a member of the Assembly, and the Assembly has some influence over the selection of the regents that governs the curriculum and what goes into the curriculum and what we do with our schools, I would push for making that kind of education part of the curriculum, at least in high school, where one can soon be ready for political involvement. So my answer to the problem would be to launch a campaign to educate voters about what officers do and also what the requirements are to run for an office. And this way you can have more people who have knowledge, who understand the process, and once they have understanding, they would be more inclined to get involved with some knowledge of the process. So my answer would be education. I think first thing, I would like the state to acknowledge that we have a housing crisis. We have a situation where there's a great demand for housing and a limited supply. And in this process, landlords and other people are forced to do things to try to get this market rate. I think the first thing I would like to do once I get to Albany is to have the Assembly acknowledge that we have a housing crisis. And once we agree that we have a chaotic market where there's just a great demand and a limited supply and something needs to be done, we need some kind of government intervention. It's like when we had a depression and we had 25% of the people are unemployed, the government was justified to take a more aggressive role in correcting the problem. So I want to first acknowledge that we have a housing crisis, and then we would meet and decide exactly what we need to do to alleviate the suffering of the people that occurs because of this housing crisis. Certainly we need to enforce the laws that protects tenants, and also we need to maybe create another entity to actually advocate forcefully on behalf of tenants, because I find that having legal representation is sometimes not enough, because someone who's steeped in the law myself, sometimes that takes a lot more than just legal representation to get your right. You sometimes need a government entity that will actually advocate for you with the necessary skills and expertise.